I want to welcome you to Clarksville, Montgomery County. If you're not a citizen here, and I know that many of you are. So this is an exciting event to have, sponsored at Austin State University. So we are so glad to have all of you here. Hope you're enjoying the entire conference and reap the benefits of it and learn something, and hope you get an opportunity to see our community while you're here. I'd just like to point out, too, that we have another elected official in the group. We have our representative, Joe Pitts. Joe, you want to stand? Thank you, and have a very enjoyable evening and rest of the conference.
So I have a confession to make. I mean, you know, I thought my conference organizing days were over many years ago. And I'll tell you, when I was a graduate student, I was a research assistant for a conference crazy professor. In my 2 years as a research assistant, I organized the 16th Century Studies Conference, the Don Quixote seminars, the Computer in the Brain, a tribute to John von Neumann, and, well, I'm missing one. Whatever. I think it was John Milton, because she was a John Milton scholar. But she had a lot of interests. And, you know, at the time, I thought I was going to fail out of graduate school. But I didn't. I mean, I persevered through it. And what I really learned was that conferences are about people working together. It's not about one person doing it all. It's really about being a collective and bringing about something that's valuable that hasn't been seen before. So I would really like to ask the board members of the Arts and Heritage Development Council to stand, because I would like to thank them for all their support in all of this. Would you please stand up? And none of this could have been done without the volunteers who are not here because they're volunteers and they choose to be elsewhere. But led by my wonderful assistant, Rashida Abdullah, and I would like a round of applause for them because they really did the job. This also couldn't have come about with our without the support of our sponsors. And if you would please stand up when I call your names, I'd appreciate it. Provost Tristan and Kim Denley. Austin State University supported us through the Office of the President and Vice Provost. Planters Bank, Joe Pitts, and Cindy Pitts, thank you. Also from the Tennessee Arts Commission, Lee Baird and Dennis Atkins. We're very thankful to the Tennessee Arts Commission, not only for the Artist Project Support Grant, but for all the hard work that they do in ensuring that all Tennesseans have opportunities in the arts. And also, if Mr. Alan Robeson would stand up, Director of the Customs House Museum and Cultural Center. The Customs House is a great friend to the Arts and Heritage Development Council. They lend us office space in order for us to be able to do our work. And thank you so much. And we also have individuals who support us generously and have throughout the entire conference. This is the 6th year. Throughout all these years, they have been there to support us, and I would like to acknowledge them. Patricia and Howard Wayne. Dee and Sam Bowes. Dee and Sarah and Alex Darnell. welcome Dewey Browder. And also, we've received an incredible amount of support from our local media, and I want to acknowledge them. From the Leaf Chronicle, Stacy Lacer and Chris Smith. We have a wonderful publisher in the Leaf Chronicle, Andrew Ottman, who has really let us all know that he's behind arts and culture in Clarksville. And last but not least, Bill Larson and Mark Haynes. And there they are, right over there. These guys are great. They have the online news, and what they do and what he's doing right now is they film us and they put us online and they get people to see what they missed. You know, that's what we're trying to do, is get people to see what they should be seeing. You know, it's wonderful what we provide our community through our arts and cultural events. And I also want to thank the Review Inn for being the host hotel. The Fort Campbell Officers Spouses Club, they have been there from the beginning. I mean, they do a lot of work on the fort. They also reach out into the community, and they've been very generous to the Writers Conference. And also the city of Clarksville. We receive general operating support through them, and that helps us to do what we can do to bring arts and cultural events to the community. So I've been a reader all my life. What drew me into writing, in fact, was being a reader. The more I read, the more I wanted to try to do what some of my literary heroes were doing. And this was my inspiration in organizing this year's conference by aligning practical sessions and readings throughout each day. I want to reach out to the community of readers and invite them to listen to authors reading their wonderful prose and poetry, but to also consider sitting in on a few practical sessions that deal with mechanics as well as the mysteries and the alchemy of writing. I also feel that for the writers attending the conference, their practical learning experiences are best digested along with hearing the written word. Listening is a form of learning too. Subtleties of cadence and tone must be heard aloud to be understood. Reaching out to these twin communities of readers and writers require that I find writers who write well, read well, and teach well. And ladies and gentlemen, I present to you some of the best writers and teachers working in the United States today. And when I call your names, please stand up. Darnell Arnaud. Lars Falconer. Beth-Ann Finley. Matthew Gavin Frank. Tom Franklin. William Gay. Kenton Johnson. Rita Grimsley Johnson, who had to leave early due to something she had to attend to. A. Scott Pearson. David James Poisson. Chuck Sambucino. Step up momentarily. Robert Love Taylor. Also Michael Weave. We are also delighted to have as our keynote speaker this evening the distinguished writer Alice Randall. Alice Randall is a Renaissance woman. Whatever she sets out to accomplish, it seems she does exceptionally well. But let me ask Patricia Wynn to join me, and she will introduce our distinguished keynote speaker. Pat Wynn is the past conference chair and founder of this conference. She stepped down this past year after 5 years of service. I know of no one who excels in her grace and steel magnolia hood. Ladies and gentlemen, Patricia Wynn.
Before I introduce the star of the evening, I would like to thank someone who's very dear to my heart tonight. And all of you are arts and heritage, everyone that's worked on the conference. But I want so much to thank Chris Kowala for being the chairman of the Writers Conference this year. Alice Randall is a New York Times best-selling novelist, award-winning songwriter, and a popular essayist. A graduate of Harvard University, she has lectured across the country. Her fiction has been and is currently being taught in a wide range of universities. Among them are Harvard, Princeton, the University of Virginia, Wesleyan, and Vanderbilt University. She is studied in a variety of contexts as a satirist, as a Southern writer, as an African-American writer, and as a writer concerned with the nature of the feminine, both in text and in American life. She is the writer of residence at Vanderbilt, where she teaches country lyric and American culture, creative writing, and soul food as text and in text. Her books include The Wind Undone, a parody of Gone with the Wind, Pushkin and the Queen of Spades, and Rebel Yell. She is considered one of the greatest Southern African-American novelists today. Alice is accompanied by her husband, attorney David Ewing of Nashville. So she comes to us tonight free. The last time I saw her, she grabbed my hand. She said, "Ms. Wynn, I'm coming and I'm coming free." You have no idea how much these people get. But this is her gift to us, and I would like to thank her. I know that you thank her, and I'm going to turn it over to the star of the evening, Alice.
Well, it is my pleasure to accept this invitation. And I will say that when I go out of town, I rarely, if ever charge in town. But when I go down the street, I ask them for the $5,000 or $7,000, but not at home. And the honor of, and I actually rarely take speaking engagements because I love being at home. My husband's very involved in, I'm very much a wife and a mother, as well as a writer and a professor. And we have a dining table that seats 18, and we fill it up all the time. We sometimes have 100 and some for dinner, and I haven't known to cook for 100 myself. So I love to stay close to home. And but the opportunity to come to Clarksville and be part of the wonderful tradition of Vanderbilt writers that came up the river to Ben Folly. I didn't quite get all the way to Ben Folly tonight, but I got to come here without an opportunity to be missed. So I want to begin by thanking all involved in the Clarksville Writers Conference, but particularly Patricia Wynn, who is the reason that I am here. That she represents, and I always write my talks individually for each occasion, but the best of a kind of Southern lady and Southern woman and Southern woman in art that I'm very happy to celebrate with you tonight. If you are here tonight, I have a strong suspicion about you. Many of you read Rebel Yell. Now, this novel has, among other things, to do with being a black spy story. They have lots to do with suspicions. I suspect you love reading, writing, and the South. I love them too, and so do my heroines. Cinera, the narrator and heroine of The Wind on Dawn, is an exhausted 28-year-old concubine, making a life for herself in Reconstruction Atlanta when my first novel opens. She's been given a diary and a pen as a birthday gift. She uses these tools to revive herself despite an ongoing, unnamed battle with mucus. By the final pages of her diary, she has abandoned her white husband in favor of a more profound alliance with the black congressman. Windsor Armstrong is the 43-year-old professor of Russian literature at Vanderbilt University when my second novel, Pushkin and the Spades, opens, with Windsor's howl that echoes Mamie Till's, "Look what they've done to my son." The novel is a suicide note that changes tone and becomes a love letter that changes back into a suicide note over and over again, as Windsor attempts to explain to her son, the football player, about to marry a white Russian lap dancer. One of the funny things about that is I did invent that, and I had 3 different Titans come up and say, "Did you write that about me?" But actually, you know, National Reddit wrote about a Belle Meade man who was probably a banker, I won't say what he really was, who tried to pass off a woman as some kind of European aristocrat that really was a Russian lap dancer in her first permeation. So I attempt to explain, but when you think Windsor Armstrong, think Condoleezza Rice, who does have her doctorate in Russian studies. And I have another Condoleezza character in Rebel Yell called Aria Reese. I'm fascinated by Condoleezza Rice. But as Windsor attempts to explain to her son, the football star, about to marry a white Russian lap dancer, how her life got to untenable, and just how much she loves him, though not enough to bless his marriage to woman utterly unlike her. We meet Hope Clementine Morgan Blackshear, the heroine of Rebel Yell, Thanksgiving of 2005. Hope is in every apparent sense a privileged and fortunate woman. She has a brainy and bright dreadlocked son, a handsome older doctor husband, a successful enough career as a sculptor, and some inherited money. One of the things I like to do is write about the kind of black people everybody doesn't know about. I've never written about it. Some people have occasionally have gotten the criticism that the books are aspirational. I have never created a character that I did not know at least 3 examples of inequality they didn't have, and in a black person. Hope radically savors spending her time carving portraits in the form of merry-go-rounds and taking care of her men. Then her first husband dies, and she's drawn from her comfortable alienation from the man with whom she made a child into a distaste for lawyers she discovers him to be, a White House lawyer, all too involved with Guantanamo and Abu Ghraib, eventually arriving at an appreciation of the man. One of the things I tried to deal with in Rebel Yell, and I think being so close to Clarksville, is interesting to note this, the days here, and I have such great admiration for the men and women who keep our country safe. But, when Barack Obama became president, it went without noticing that actually in the second Bush White House, there were more high-ranking black officials in the second Bush White House than there had been in the Clinton White House, and that many of them were involved in the defense establishment. And again, Condoleezza Rice is a good example, is it turns out that Negroes, black people, who were raised in a time and place of terror, the South in the 60s, in the Civil Rights era, had become the watchdogs of the terror in the world, which is very interesting. Rebel Yell tracks Hope and Abel, and those of you who are familiar with your Bible, you'll realize that Abel was the first person killed in the Bible, the first murder mystery in our literature. Rebel Yell tracks Hope and Abel as they traipse around the globe, a black spy family masquerading as a young black diplomatic family, until the family explodes. Moving from the Philippines to New York and then on to Manila, Hope discovers that the South in the 60s, the South of Abel's childhood, is very much with them every mile of the way. Hope comes to understand that Abel was raised in a time and place of terror, and he's more interested than she would like him to be in being the watchdog of terror in the world. As Hope unravels Abel's understanding of terror and safety and what he is willing to do to achieve safety, she finds solace in the pages of Franz Fanon, Charles Chestnut, Susan Sontag, Nella Larson, Nathaniel Hawthorne, Bernard Lewis, Elizabeth Barrett Browning, Jean Rees, Ricardo de Assis, the great Brazilian writer and grandson of slave, Balzac, Marot, Sendak, Hurston, Fitzgerald, and even John Buchanan, who wrote one of the great spy novels classic. And she finds her way back to loving the black neocon she comes to understand as a casualty of an unannounced war. Cinderella Windsor Hope, the good daughter, the good mother, and the good wife. Good, but not simply good. In the world created by my fiction, good is never simple. Cinderella, the good daughter, does not go to her mother's deathbed. Windsor, the good mother, is exiled from her son's wedding, is in competition with his fiancée. Hope, the good wife, divorces her husband, yet stays in significant ways loyal to him. Each of my heroines believes excellence is within her grasp. They have moved beyond good enough, not because they are grandiose, but because they are well familiar with the extraordinary difficulties of life. They are black women and understand that what is barely sufficient can be made insufficient. They are not women who count on ordinary ease. They are women who have developed over time with work the ability to wrestle down extraordinary challenges, some days of the year, some hours of the day. Other hours, other days, they are utterly defeated. Something like the South after the Civil War. And like the South after the Civil War, my heroines, by finding and using their own language, transcend defeat and enter into a territory of peace. I will stop and say that's what I have fallen in love with about country music. And as a black person raised, my mother was a political scientist and sort of the cradle of the civil rights movement. One of the things I chose to do as a black woman who was writing her thesis on mothers and daughters of the native novelist of Jane Austen at Harvard originally was come down and look at country music and claim it as a significant art form, in part because I thought there's some really amazing black influences in it that were unrecognized, from the banjo to teapot to influence Hank Williams, and in part because it was the music of uneducated, underclass white people that was not being respected because that it was class music, and because the people who were writing it did not have fancy degrees. And I thought if I asked people to stand up for my civil rights as a person, I will stand up for the civil rights of of the great country songwriters who are not recognized as American poets. And that is some work I have continued to this day. I do stand here and say I put Merle Haggard as one of the greatest of all American poets. And that falls right into this theme of tonight. As a writer, I have taken as one of my goals the reinvention of Dixie. From the beginning of my life as a novelist, when I reinvented Dixie by overwriting Gone with the Wind, I've been interested in a writer in palimpsest, parody, and pain transcended. Those are some of the very same things the best country songs concern themselves. I was accused by the Margaret Mitchell Trust of writing a sequel to Gone with the Wind. Some of you may remember that they sued my publisher for $10 million. A sequel from a black perspective could perhaps be written and may or may not be allowed under the law. It is not, however, what I've done. That book, let us call it Uncle Tom Goes to Tara. I maintain that slavery and the Confederacy were benign institutions. And I speak here as someone, my grandfather's father, my great-grandfather was Confederate General Edmund Pettus. That slavery and the Confederacy were benign institutions. It might perpetuate the myth that Scarlett was more attractive than every other woman and Melanie was sweeter. Rhett Butler and Ashley Wilkes, white aristocrats both, will remain the two most desirable men in that world. Mammy's body remained fat and black and asexual. A sequel would exploit Margaret Mitchell's characters. My novel, The Wind and Gone, is a parody that seeks to explode the archetypes associated with Gone with the Wind that have moved into the American imagination. My parody creates an entirely different and radical universe, a universe in which the two most attractive men are a brilliant black congressman who appears nowhere in Miss Mitchell's novel, and a black horse trainer of subtle intelligence, Jeeves. The most attractive woman in this universe is the ironic mulatto Cinderella, who reads and writes her way into being an identity. Melody is a sadistic, multiple murderer. How sweet can you be if everything that you own is paid for and someone else is suffering in the selling of their children? I love Melody, but you've got to answer that question. Ashley and Belle are gay, and almost everybody turns out to be black, including Scarlett, her sisters and her mother. And there's some really good evidence, I think, in the text. What is all that stuff about Miss Scarlett's mother not being able to marry her cousin? And much, much more significantly, Mandy's body becomes what the scholar Andrea Elizabeth Shaw has called the embodiment of disobedience. For those of you who know so quickly about it, so some blank stares, but what is all that stuff about? I love Melody's mother, Scarlett's mother, and in my book, she's honored as a character called Lady. But that whole thing about her not being able to marry her cousin, it reminds me of Elizabeth Barrett Browning and Robert Browning, and many people now, scholars believe that it's true that Robert Browning and Elizabeth Barrett Browning were both part black, and one of the reasons that her father was so absolutely opposed to any of the children marrying was that they would have a child that appeared black. And that once they did get married, it was years before he would even see the child. So he turned out to be very fair with light eyes, and that's been written about quite a bit. The Mitchell estate, the folks who sued my first publisher, Houghton Mifflin, for $10 million, like to say GWTW is a well-loved novel. A sequel would exploit that love. My work is overtly political and critical. Why it is kept, there are people who hate Donald Trump. In his autobiography, Malcolm X wrote, I remember one thing, and of course his autobiography of Malcolm X was really written by the Tennessean, someone named Alice Randall. I remember one thing that marred this time for me, the movie Gone with the Wind. When it played in Mason, I was the only Negro in the theater, and when Butterfly McQueen went into her act, I felt like crawling under the rug. A story that could shame Malcolm. What may it have done to weaker beings? It caused this woman to palimpsest. I palimpsest. The Oxford English Dictionary gives us the first definition of the noun palimpsest: paper, parchment, or other writing material designed to be reusable after any writing on it has been erased. Before noting that this definition is obsolete. The second definition given for the noun is a parchment or other writing surface on which the original text has been effaced or partially erased and then overwritten by another, a manuscript in which later writing has been superposed on an earlier effaced writing. The third of the noun definitions is as follows: an extended use, a thing likened to such as writing surface, especially having been reused or altered while still retaining traces of its earlier form, a multi-layered record. If we look to Wikipedia article on palimpsest, a particularly interesting enterprise, at least to me, because Wikipedia is itself a palimpsest, we learned that with each subsequent editor overwriting the text of the other, we learned that the original palimpsests were parchments or papyrus that were overwritten, sometimes out of necessity, sometimes as an act of desecration. Parchment and papyrus have special resonances in my African-American imagination. To write on parchment is to write on skin. To write on papyrus is to enter into the world of Egypt. Consider parchment and papyrus in the American South is to encounter scars and other markings on the skin, as well as to entertain Afrocentric notions, romantic, ahistorical, historical, and other, that understand African Americans to be the descendants of the people who built the Great Pyramids. When I wrote my palimpsest, I included a scene of Cinera creating her own palimpsest, even as she and I nod toward both those histories, the real and the imagined. And this is what I'm quoting Cinera's diary from the first book. If I go back there, I'm going to get my daddy's watch and have him read RB from to R period B from N period E. I don't feel like laughing, but I can just see R laughing at my joke. I can just see him open the satin-lined leather box. He'll understand. He expects me to play with letters. He taught me how to read in bed. I praised him for it. His stomach was my first paper, lip rouge was my pencil, and the cleaning rag was my tongue. He learned me well. R gave me the tools. I learned to write on his belly. Freud talks about the mind of the child as being a special kind of palimpsest that he likened to a magic writing tablet. And we have in this novel that uses inversion as a prominent strategy, Cinera using R's belly as a magic writing tablet in which history is reimagined. In this small moment, we see the edges of my reinvented Dixie. The black woman is literate, the lovers are lovers, erotic, entangled, mutually manipulative, and largely free. To overwrite a text, to create a powerful palimpsest, one must do more and different than obliterate the original. One must, I believe, conscript elements of the original and use them to whole new purposes that suggest to the reader additional complexity and elasticity in the original text, while simultaneously underlining the possibility that the world created by the original text is in some substantial way inadequate and incomplete, that more is required if not recognized. If someone has a copy of The Wind on Gun could throw it to me, I think I saw someone on, you have one, don't you? Who has it? Can I borrow yours for 1 second? I want to just take it. 1 second. Here, since I heard this wonderful mention by Chris about teaching, I want to read you just from the first paragraph of this one and for a little bit of, all you public, today is the anniversary of my birth. I have 28 years. This diary and the pen I'm writing with are the best gifts I got, except maybe my cake. R gave me the diary, the pen, and the white frosted tears. He also gave me emerald earbuds. I think maybe my emeralds are just green glass. I hope maybe they be genuine peridot. Now that seems so simple, almost idiotically so. This book got some very bad reviews. Someone said that tata was a misspelling of tara as opposed to the word for thank you in Southern English. But if you notice that today is the anniversary of my birth, I have 28 years. The book is announcing right there it's in translation. No one says today is the anniversary of my birth. You say today is my birthday. And I have 28 years is exactly a translation from French. I have. J'ai 20 ans. And then when you notice here, I say, R gave me the diary, the pen, and the white frosted tears. That's T-I-E-R-S, but that's also in there, the homonym for tears, T-E-A-R-S, white frosted sorrow. So by the time I can go through this, when we get to, I hope maybe they be emeralds, I hope maybe they be genuine peridots. That's already the homonym for genuine parody. That, people saying that you said that after, it's so much compression. In one simple paragraph, the book is telling you to read for homonyms, that R like that is also R-A-R-E, which already you see she's so involved with Rhett Butler, we are, it's a plural form of we. When she extricates herself from him, he then becomes an object, dead chauffeur. So we can go on and on. But in my ideal palimpsest, each layer of the new text dances with the layers of the previous text. One of the first ones, Gone with the Wind, is Scarlet Hair was not beautiful, but men don't recognize it. My book dances with it. The Wind Gone Gone dances an old dance with the text of Gone with the Wind, and it dances an old dance that is the cakewalk. The cakewalk was originally a plantation dance, but it's more than a dance. It's a sly parody created by enslaved African Americans of European quadrilles. Came into fashion about 1840. From the very beginning, it has black and white in it. Blacks observed whites and created a commentary with dance based on their observations. Fortunately and unfortunately, white folks living in great plantations misunderstood the dance to be an imitation of European dance. Many Southern aristocrats perceived the cakewalk to be a gross or vulgar mimicking that ultimately they found amusing as an illustration of black inferiority. In truth, the cakewalk was a subtle and critical commentary on the differences between the aesthetics of black and white dance styles. In time, plantation owners began to encourage cakewalk contests or competitions between black dancers. The winning dancer or dance pair was rewarded with a cake. To win the contest was to take the cake, a phrase we still have. You also note here that when we have this black woman getting a cake in the very first part of this novel, eventually it'll say, this is my cakewalk, watch me high step, and Scarlett O'Hara is behind. I'm also signaling to you for the first time that Scarlett O'Hara might be black, because she is doing a cakewalk competition with Cinderella, my main character. Later, the cakewalk moved from the plantation to the city of Vaudeville, where it was performed in minstrel shows, often by white dancers in blackface. Then the dance moved back into the black community, transformed another time by blacks who further exaggerated the steps, including an additional layer of commentary responsive to the white minstrel performances, and adding another layer of that rapidly evolving performance that we can understand as another kind of palimpsest. The phrase, that takes the cake, comes from the cakewalk experience and means that wins. But who wins? What is rewarded? Most European social dancing in the 19th century was performed upright, the body held rigid and vertical. Most of the movement is in the feet. Many of these these dances are face-to-face. Some of the Irish dancing that you see today is like that. In contrast, face-to-face dancing is not part of any African dance tradition. And West Africa has a tradition of dancing in which movements originate from the abdominal and hip regions of the body. Thus, the chalk line walk, as the cakewalk was called in its first leg, sometimes involved dancers who would walk a straight line while balancing buckets of water on their heads to mimic what they perceived to be the excessive rigidity in their so-called masters. However, subversive additions that transform the very nature of the dance were added. These might include exaggerated bending back of the body and dropping the hands at the wrist, as well as high kicking, all while maintaining an element of rigidity. In the performance of this dance, a parody of the plantation master's aristocratic manners, incorporating loose leg movements and abdominal hip action, as well as rigidity, face-to-face elements, side-by-side elements, early black dancers asserted that 1, I can do what you do and do it better, maintain pattern and rigidity. 2, I can do something you can't do, achieve a level of looseness. And 3, this is far most important complex statement embedded in the dance, I can acknowledge that I both understand and have mastered your aesthetics while baffling you with a coded expression of my own. I can make a fool of you and get you to pay me with pastry. It is worth noting that minstrel shows in which whites put on blackface and dance and sang like blacks, are themselves subversive. When the minstrel show white dancers assert to black dancers, I can be black better than you. Whether or not this is judged to be a winning performance, whether it takes a cake, will depend on who is doing the judging. And we have variations of that right now in current white hip-hop artists who are essentially asserting that very same thing, as is Keisha. You know, Keisha, or Kesha, however you pronounce it, with a little dollar sign. She's essentially, in some hand, one interpretation of it is some kind of white minstrality. But now that we've talked a bit about parody and palimpsest, I want to talk just a few more minutes about reinventing Dixie and pain by looking at my novel through the lens of first novel, through the lens of speculative fiction. What if Scarlett O'Hara had a black illegitimate half-sister? What if she were more beautiful than Scarlett? What if someone noticed that Scarlett wasn't beautiful? What if? The Wind Done Gone involves multiple layers of speculation. In my novel, someone of significance, Rhett, notices that Scarlett is not beautiful, and that notice is an act of literary and political sabotage. When Rhett notices that Scarlett isn't the most beautiful woman in the world, isn't even beautiful, the myth of the old South gets turned upside down, and a new South begins to rise. It is in this new and complicated South my later heroines, Hope and Windsor, live. As we are approaching the sesquicentennial of the Civil War, I'd like to close by taking a look at a passage near the end of Rebel Yell that contemplates a Confederate War Memorial in Arlington Cemetery. And this is what I'd like to read you. This one. She got out her heavy black skillet. This is Hope, the heroine of Rebel Yell, who's married to a black doctor, and she's had her first husband just die. She got out her heavy black skillet and prepared to start frying chicken. AJ and Waycross would for sure know they were home when they saw the bright orange chicken breast on the pristine squares of white bread. She would make it so hot it would get their heads straight right off. Hot chicken stones you, and high is always the first time high. According to local urban legend, people have been known to detox from crack and hot chicken and prayer. Hope mixed up her own special paste of cayenne and fine chopped habaneros. She would get all of their heads straight. That day, as she chopped the peppers, her hands were stinging and her eyes were tearing, and her mind was thinking about Washington the Lord, about elephants and Jesus and Washington. Not for fame or reward, not for the place or for rank, not lured by ambition or goaded by necessity, but in simple obedience to duty as they understood it. These men suffered all, sacrificed all, dared all, and died. Not for fame or reward, not for place or for rank, not lured by ambition or goaded by necessity, but in simple obedience to duty as they understood it. These men suffered all, sacrificed all, dared all, and died. Those were the words inscribed on the Confederate memorial. Pregnant words, particularly interesting to Hope. She pondered the fact that plaque on the monument been placed there by the United Daughters of the Confederacy, Magnolia white Southern women who themselves themselves and face the privations of war with an obedience that could never rightly be called simple. Betrayed and betraying, cosseted and corseted, plagued and ignored, these women were peculiarly bound. They had served on an invisible front, gaining intimate knowledge of duty and the double-edged sword of freedom that attends it, the freedom to transcend or transgress, balancing the freedom to commit and serve. There was a story about Elvis and his manager, Colonel Tom Parker, that Abel and Hope had liked together. The colonel had started a business as an owner of a circus. He knew elephant handlers. Eventually, he learned the big secret of the elephant tent. You get a little bitty baby elephant and a great big rope. You tie the rope around the elephant's neck with a slip knot. You poke the elephant with a sharp stick. The elephant tries to break free of the rope, and the rope tightens around his neck and holds. You poke him again and again until he learns not to try to break free. So the elephant knows the rope is stronger than he is. You can tie that elephant down with that rope for the rest of his life, no matter how big he gets, as long as you never poke him with a sharper stick. As long as you don't give him cause to discover his abilities have increased, as long as you keep him hobbled by memory, tethered by and to past realities. Simple obedience requires complex illusions, duty as they understood it. The words were a fitting epitaph for Abel, a man who was ever balancing freedom against duty and duty against freedom, and fear against them both. When the chicken was fried, every breast sitting on its square of Wonder Bread with a near fluorescent disc of green pickle, lightly flecked with cayenne spirituous top like a medal, Hope walked into the library, found her DVD of Munich, the movie about the men who were secretly sent to binge the Israeli athletes who had been massacred at the Munich Olympics in 1972, and pushed play. One of the things that people don't forget that these characters remember is there is a monument in Arlington National Cemetery, the Confederate War Memorial, that was placed there in the early part of the last century by privileged white women who paid with their own money. And they put a black soldier in that monument and a man in an act of compassion and honoring dignity that I learned to honor in my work. And I think that it's interesting to see what we lose when we forget history. And when we look across the world to the Middle East and we see people desecrating something and saying, how could they do that? They're animals. But to remember that we put the National Cemetery, Arlington is placed where it is, on the grounds of the Custis Lee Mansion, to desecrate the Lee home. That the Union Army, that the federal government decided to bury Union soldiers and black soldiers on the old Lee place, on the mansion, to desecrate it. Now we can all perceive, I hope, that honoring came back. But I feel to honor the women who chose to honor all the soldiers and all the people who served. Because true and profound appreciation invites true and profound appreciation. That awareness is the center of what is best and works in the novel The Help. It is the center of what is best and works in my novel. It is the center of what is best and works in the South. In this new South, we claim each other and most profoundly discover ourselves. Thank you for inviting me. I want to talk about great stuff later. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for coming out tonight. Standing for a banquet. Please have more dessert though before you go. And thank you for supporting us. Many of you here are not conference participants, but have come here in support of the conference, and we're very grateful for that. Thank you and good evening.